Okay.
Normally takes just a few seconds to connect to our YouTube.
I understand. I understand. Okay.
Chair Jackson, you may now proceed.
Thank you. I call the December 27th meeting of the Commission on Equity to order. And let me start by saying joyous Kwanzaa to all of you. I trust you had a great Christmas and you all are safe and snuggled in. And thank you all for putting forth the effort on this holiday week to be a part of this. We have two people joining us by audio. And do we have anyone joining us remotely?
I think the real question when we go back over the snow will be, did he have to fire?
Chair Jackson, we currently have no additional participants at today's meeting.
I'm picking up some conversation from someone. Am I the only one hearing that?
No, I heard it too. I heard it too.
Okay. I don't know if another meeting is taking place that was cutting in on us. Okay, I don't hear it now, so maybe it's gone. Very good, very good. They will start with the approval of our agenda, previous meeting minutes, and the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda and the minutes of the previous meeting.
Is there a second?
I second it.
It's been moved and seconded that the consent agenda be approved. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I should have pointed out before I moved that so fast on the meeting of minutes from November 20. On the written minutes, it has Monday instead of Saturday is the date that actually happened. I meant to call that to your attention, Shannon.
And Chair Jackson,
that's Saturday afternoon.
We can take care of that.
Yes, I didn't think, yeah, that's a very minor thing. So it's nothing to correct. So the minutes, the agenda was approved unanimously. Thank you for that. And I understand we have no one joining us on Zoom. Therefore, there's no one to offer public comment.
Correct, Chair Jackson, there is no participants on Zoom.
Very good. How about the telephone? Any that you can see?
No, Chair Jackson, no telephone.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Then that takes us to our inspirational item that Commissioner Clay is going to provide for us this evening.
Yes, thank you. This month, the world lost two very important people, and I want to give just a little quote from each one of them. The first one is Bell Hooks, who was a writer, feminist, very strong voice in our world. And she says, "For me, forgiveness and compassion are always linked. How do we hold people accountable for wrongdoing, and yet be in the same time remain in touch with their humanity enough to believe in their capacity to be transformed?" And then the other is Desmond Tutu, somebody who was incredibly generous with his heart and not only in South Africa, but all around the world. And his goes hand in hand with Bell Hooks and with our work. Forgiving and being reconciled is not about pretending that things are other than they are. It is not about patting one another on the back and turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, the truth. It can even sometimes make things worse. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end, it is worthwhile, because in the end, Only an honest confrontation with reality can bring real healing. Superficial reconciliation can only bring superficial healing. So I offer those two heartfelt and genius people of humanity to inspire our work.
Those were beautiful, Annie. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I was heartbroken when I saw the death of Desmond Tutu just the other day. A giant. But it does remind us of the work we have before us that we're trying to engage in. So thank you. Thank you for that inspiration. Any other comment on Annie's beautiful offering to us today? Hearing none, then that takes us into item 4, our business items. Shannon?
Commissioners, we are joined here again by Tevin Medley from the Athena Group, and he's going to lead us through our Strategic Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan Workshop number 3, which is creating a mission statement. I know it's been a couple of months since we've had Tevin join us, and we're glad to see you, Tevin.
Hey, good to see everyone. Great to be back. Okay, and I think I can go ahead and get started now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Awesome. And one thing I'm wondering is if I have, which I believe I do, the ability to screen share. Awesome. So we're just gonna take a quick peek at our agenda today. And can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
What we're going to do today, and I think where we're going to spend a lot of our time is between 2 items. First, we're going to check in. I would love to know how everyone's showing up to the space today, any access needs that folks have. And again, those access needs are like, hey, I might go grab a cup of coffee, or there's something else that I might attend to, or my camera might be off, anything like that. We're going to take a look at our equity values. Specifically, I want to discuss any language changes or additions, general feedback, not the last version that we'll have. I'm going to speak a little bit about, how these mission, vision, values come together within this process. We're going to have a really nice conversation about race. Just a quick overview of institutional, individual, and structural racism. This is kind of addressed in some of that conversation, but we'll look at some definitions, again, provided by the Washington Office of Financial Management. They have a great resource there. And then we're going to look at some examples of mission statements, as well as kind of review what we have for a mission statement or something we're thinking of as a draft as a group. Something similar to what we did with the values. We'll take a look, we'll make additions, we'll come back to it. So to kick us off, anyone who would like to begin, and we could do popcorn style, any access needs, and how are you showing up to the space tonight?
I'll start, Tevin. I'm showing up, trying to come down from a very busy Christmas weekend. And I don't have any needs right now. My household quieted down a little with the exodus of 2/3 of the family that's been here until just a few hours ago. The snow had them hunkered down a little longer than planned, extra night. So the house quieted back down just in time for this Zoom meeting. So for that, I'm appreciative. Yes. So checking in, looking forward to a new year. That's just a few days away.
Thanks so much for that.
I'll go next. This is Kim. I'm like Dr. Jackson. It's just quieting down a little bit. I appreciated the opportunity to go out and walk the snow today. I've been out for 2 days, and it was just wonderful to be able to walk the dog and check out the neighbors and Was a little chilly at first, but it was just very, very pleasant at the end. No access need. I am just looking forward to the meeting today.
Thanks so much.
It's Cliff. I'll go. I have no access needs. It was a wonderful Christmas having a small family here. It was relatively quiet, but we did enjoy this snow, and lots of family down south and back east. They're jealous, that we had a white Christmas sort of, and then aftermath, they're just really jealous when they have record high temperatures down there in Mississippi and Texas and places. So other than that, just looking forward to the meeting tonight.
Thanks.
This is Annie. I will ditto. Looking forward to this meeting. I just always appreciate getting together with y'all. Yeah, we had a good, not too exciting Christmas, and I'm just very thankful that I don't have a job to go to because I'm retired. And then I just get to look at it and the snow and walk around. Went to the grocery store 5 blocks away and whatnot. So yeah, I'm feeling good. Ready to get to work from 2022.
Great.
Thanks.
It's Commissioner Hart. Showing up, ready to get going. Had a quiet couple of days. Like you guys, I have the family around, so we did an unconventional holiday. We had our Christmas the day before because of work schedules with the kids, but the last couple of days have been really quiet, and just prepared to get ready to get some things done for this commission. So it's great to see everybody again.
Thanks.
Did
Hi,
we
this
lose
is
our
Christine.
audio? Okay.
No, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'm out of the country. I'm in Sinaloa right now, and I'm in using very, very slow guest internet right now because I cannot connect to the Wi-Fi here. So I've been able to hear everything. That's my access need. I might be in and out. But yeah, other than that, same, like quiet holiday, feel rested, ready to get to work.
Great.
And then I would usually go first. I didn't go first, but I'll pop back in. And I think it's just myself and Shannon left.
Yes.
My access needs are met. I am sharing the excitement to come back together with everyone to continue planning. And I'm showing up just prepared, ready. I feel like 2021 lasted much longer than a year, is lasting longer than a year. So I'm happy to see us turn that corner into 2022.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's really good to see and hear you all again. I have no access needs right now. I think I'm having the opposite of Chair Jackson and Commissioner Sauer's experience, where instead of quieting down, today everything has ramped up from this weekend. So I am certainly looking forward to a quiet down in the next couple of days, hopefully.
Awesome, 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 awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. I'm going to screen share again. Okay, and everyone can see my screen. Okay, so thanks for sharing. The next piece we're going to go over is reflections on the mission, vision, equity, values. We're just going to talk a little bit about that. What I have here, and I'll leave this up for us to kind of look at, is our draft equity statement. And what I did is I pulled out some of the values or the key components to this statement, and I've placed them here as separate items so we can kind of look at those. So if folks have a pen handy or any thoughts to kind of think through those as I kind of go over what this process is, all really about again. So with strategic planning, there's several different ways to do strategic planning. At the something similar between all these different methods is going to be decision making. And decision making can be tough when there's tough decisions to make. And so having an equity statement, having very clear vision and mission helps make those decisions much easier to make. And so the idea is that we create these at the beginning. They're informed by new learning, not just internal learning, but also learning from the community. And then when we get into the next phases of actually drafting the plan, when we talk about strategies or specific elements that we would like to be in the strategic plan, we're going to reflect on what we had kind of come to consensus as being, our values. What are we driving? What's driving our decision making within this process? When we say we want X, Y, or Z thing, what is actually informing that? And so it just makes a lot more of a cohesive process. And it really supports each other when we say, hey, like, we have this shared set of values. It's important to us that we uphold these. Does this decision uphold those values that we share? And then many decisions become much, much clearer, much easier to see kind of a way forward. As far as the breakdown of draft values go, a few highlights here. Championing social change, I think, is a very important piece. Dismantling of systemic oppression, something we're going to cover a little bit more in detail around, what those oppressive systems look like, because it does change. It has changed since, the beginning of white supremacy culture in the US and around the world. A very important intersectional view for a long time. And I think even today in many scenarios, folks think, well, are we going to focus on race? Are we going to focus on maybe perhaps gender? Or, how do we make a decision to focus on one versus the other? But that doesn't really honor the fact that identities can intersect, and they do intersect, and they overlap. And so what we're going to do is have that kind of like element in there of intersectionality, promotion of work that advances policies and practices that dismantle oppression embedded in city policies, starting by listening, and commitment to collaboration. So as we kind of look through these, any folks here who would like to kind of add, who maybe want to have a different, anything they would like to share, we're going to continue to update this statement until we feel like it's in a really solid place. We can provide this back to the community to say, hey, do you feel seen in what we've created here? Is there anything that you all would like to add before we finalize these at the end of our planning process? And so with that, I'll just give a moment for folks to digest a bit of it and to make comments, and I'll take some notes here on my side as well.
Kevin,
Can
this
I
is,
ask? Oh,
go ahead, Ann.
Just a point of clarification. There's the draft equity statement, and then there's the draft equity mission statement towards the end, a few pages past this one. Can you clarify for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So our strategic plan is specifically focused around equity. And so there may be other types of strategic plans that are going on, maybe even at the city government level, or in other kinds of organizations, other groups with a different focus. And so because the focus of this group is equity, we wanted to have very specific equity vision, values, mission statements. And so we'll look at some examples, which I think will help tease out some of the differences that are there. But this is the reason for that is because this work is going to be for an equity strategic plan versus maybe a different type of strategic plan. Go ahead, Shannon. I see a hand up.
Commissioner Clay, I think maybe too, you're wondering how the different statements work with each other in the document itself. Is that a correct assessment? Commissioner Clay, can you hear me?
She's muted. Annie, can you unmute? I don't know if she heard you, Shannon, but she's muted.
Commissioner Clay, can you hear us? Commissioner Clay, you're on mute.
While she's trying to figure that out, soon as I see her off mute, I'll pause for her. This draft equity statement is the same statement that was first presented to us back in October. And so we brought it forward, and now this is really our first opportunity to discuss it. And I looked at it rather closely back in October when it was first presented, and really kind of gave it some thought and kind of worked at it, Kevin, as you're asking. And I had sent to Shannon an alternative draft that could be posted for everybody to take a look at, so that you could see what my thinking was. And in keeping with the values that we had talked about, trying to incorporate them, and just wanted to have a somewhat different collection of words in a little different order as we talked about this equity statement, because I think the question that Annie was raising is very important. The equity statement is one thing, and our mission statement for this equity commission is another, and it's all preparing us for the strategic plan that we're going to be coming up with. So is Annie back on with us yet?
Yes, I think. Can
Okay,
you
great.
hear me?
Yes, we hear you
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. So I think I may be having a little bit of technical problem. It looks my face, my picture is kind of frozen, but at least if I can talk and listen, that's good. So yeah, I'm ready to go on.
So Tevin, can I just come in on a few of the points I was referring to, and maybe Shannon, can your machine put that up that I sent you today?
Absolutely, Chair Jackson. We can put up the language that you sent, and I believe Mr. Medley has a copy, and he can post it onto the screen for everybody to view. While he's getting that up there, Chair Jackson, just to return to Commissioner Clay's question here for a second, to give Mr. Medley the opportunity to put this up. Commissioner Clay, I just wanted to the last question that you posed, were you also trying to understand the relationship between all of the different types of statements that we're reviewing as part of this process?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it'll begin to make more sense as we go through. I'm good.
Well, and Commissioner Clay, I would just say, we're going to be looking at several different types of statements, and I think it's very important for us all to share a collective understanding of what the intent and purpose of those statements, generally speaking, are. And so I think Mr. Medley has outlined, as we're looking at the equity values and the equity statements, those are really kind of the core beliefs of the group, the organization, what the city is trying to achieve with its diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. As we start to focus on, looking at the mission, looking at the vision and the strategy, those are going to be very different elements of the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. So broadly speaking, looking at a mission, the mission statements generally focus more on, what is the reason for the work that's being done? How do we operate to achieve the vision that's set out as part of the larger diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plan. And fundamental to that is establishing vision, which I just mentioned. And that's really, where are we going? It's future focused, and it's really a declaration of purpose. Where do you see this work taking not just this body, but the city of Lacey and the greater Lacey community moving forward? And then within that, there are strategies to achieving missions and visions that align with the values that are determined as part of the equity statement. So I just want to provide a little bit of context as we start to look more at each of these different types of statements moving forward. And it's certainly something we can revisit with each of the elements as we start to discuss them.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I try to steer away from talking about equity as kind of a journey, but I think it does help in certain situations. And, if we were all, taking a trip together, we all want to get somewhere, we have to first have agreement on where that place is we all want to get to. And these are kind of pieces of teasing out all of that. Like, are we in agreement where we want to go and why we want to go there? And so, yeah, just excited for that. And then I'm going to also screen share the updates, and we could chat about these. And can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Let me just kind of give an overview of my thinking as I looked at this and was thinking about it back in October and re-examined it again in preparation for today's meeting. Keep trying to keep in mind that as an equity commission, we are providing advice to the city, our city government, and trying to make sure that we have an equitable society and community for all people. So the first line of that talked about the city of Lacey champions social change. Social change is just one aspect of the change that's needed, I think, before we can achieve an equitable society. I think the social change is the easiest of it all, but we're talking about legislation, we're talking about policy, we're talking about procedures, we're talking about commitments, we're talking about affirmative actions that change outcomes, we're talking about changing results. So social change was a soft word for me when I think in terms of where we're trying to go as an equity commission, and not to see the change that we're trying to help the city of Lacey champion to be limited to social change. And I just struck the word social and just say the city of Lacey champions change, so that it wasn't just limited to social change. They could very well pass a resolution in support of Martin Luther King Jr. birthday or Juneteenth or whatever. Those are social changes, but have the results changed? And so I'm just kind of giving you some of the thinking that I went through there, and inserting, striving to eradicate all forms of systemic racism and oppression. We got to keep our eye on exactly how we got where we are. And so as we are drafting an equity statement that will guide our work plan, that will guide our strategic plan, that will guide the recommendations we make to the city of Lacey, I think we just got to call it what it is out there. And this is the tough stuff that Tevin is talking about. And I just went on to talk about recognizing the influence of privilege and implicit bias, and acknowledge the power and influence we have as a city to impact daily lives of our citizens. So there's a lot the city as a government can do. And this is the entity that we are advising. And so what can the city do differently in order to contribute to a more equitable community? And we talked about privilege, we talked about power. And so the city is in the business of setting policy and practices. And so the advice that we need to be thinking about giving and the changes that need to be made has to dismantle this institution of racism and some of the inequities embedded in city government and its operations. And it's just been there so long, it's just the norm. It's not a finger pointing thing, it just is. And so I just kind of moved words around that I thought would give it more strength, would give it more power as we move into our plan of work and our strategic plan as it relates back to the overall city strategic plan and the other commissions and what they're doing. And just certainly wanted to take it beyond just social change. And I didn't think in any of our discussions and thinking about our action plans that we have yet to discuss and come up with, that we were merely limiting things to social changes that we wanted to see. And so that's kind of the thinking. And I didn't abandon the draft values that were discussed here, except for that limited social change. But the rest, that was my take on how I saw we could strengthen that as we move forward, and for consideration of my fellow commissioners, if as you read that, you know, if it has any zing in your ear or whatever the case might be.
I'd noticed on their income was gone, and I think class of people would also be something that I'd add on there, as well as racial identity. One of the things that I've come upon just recently was an individual business person who, no clue, she's very ambiguous in her features, and come to find out that this individual was actually biracial, whereas I've never seen her as anything other than Caucasian. And I know that could also be an issue as well. Could be something that we could add on to there as well.
Well, I don't think it's the end all, but it was just my language,
sure.
you know, to go along with the draft we were looking at and other inclusions to build it better, strengthen it further, you know, make it as inclusive as we can make it. But those were just my thoughts that I wanted to share, other than read it to you, and you didn't have anything in front of you that you could, you know, think about. So and that plus whatever we already had, plus whatever needs to be added, you know, as Tevin said, we want this to be the guide once we move forward from here. So we need to really give it some careful thought and make sure it's saying what we wanted to say as an equity statement guiding our work.
Yeah, I love your thought process with that.
This is Kim, and to go with what Makira is saying, that if we, I can understand what Dr. Jackson is saying. Also, we can't be, naming every single group. But when you said all, and then it's not quite that inclusive, can we make the language more inclusive? That it's just not what you are mentioning here. But earlier I saw English, limited English proficiency, income or whatever. I don't know. I think we can make it more inclusive language.
Well, it's going to be ours, so let's make it what we want.
And I think also maybe housing should be mentioned as well. It talks about economic opportunities, but housing may be a separate item in itself.
Like I said, let's just build on it and make it ours, you know?
Absolutely. Any other thoughts before we kind of keep diving into the equity drafts that we have in front of us?
I would just say that some of the examples that we were given, and some of the wording that I've seen in other places, I agree with the idea that social change is only one kind, and we have to, I strongly feel we have to acknowledge the harm done already and the implicit and sometimes on purpose bias that our organizations have. I think that we do need to be strongly worded.
Thank you for that. So what I'm going to do is oh, go ahead, Shannon. I see a hand up.
So I know that the materials presented today were, the first time, and we've gone through the former draft equity statement, and then Chair Jackson had the language proposed today. So I will send that language out to all of you so that you all can take a look at both of those statements and consider that and look at the language moving forward. And then we can come back to this conversation at a future date as part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic plans. But also feel free to send me any thoughts or edits or additions or changes that you might be thinking looking at the two versions. And that way we can compile all of them into information that we can look together as a group and have a more robust conversation on at our next meeting.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. And one last thing I'll add too on the language piece is I think it is really would be very important to also think about how these words and how the language we use translates into other languages. So sometimes working with marginalized communities, for example, I've worked with folks from countries where human rights wasn't something that was very familiar, or not, at least not the way that it is here in the US, or other concepts of rights or concepts of protections that are different in different languages. And so just to keep in mind that sometimes reintroducing folks to these ideas and terms does spark change. There may not necessarily be a direct translation, but it gets a conversation going. And so we have one version in English, but to also think that, this may be provided in more than just English, and what that might mean to introduce folks to some of these ideas and concepts that maybe they've not heard before, maybe have not seen translated before. But I think that approach is great to, let's take the drafts, let's pull the pieces together. And let's just see what we come up with next, and then just keep us moving forward. I'm going to screen share again. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to chat about race, and one of the biggest takeaways that I've ever had from conversations on race and kind of like supporting folks in understanding more of the why, the how, the what is it. So race is 100% just man-made. Humans made it. It doesn't really exist. And so we look around, we see folks are, have different hue, they have different color, they have long hair versus short hair, and those things are all absolutely true. So noticing difference is not an issue. Racism comes into play when we say that those differences hold value better than or lesser than for whatever reason, so no other reason other than race. And so that's when we have, all these deeply embedded issues that we see. There's two videos I want to share that kind of encapsulate a lot of these ideas. But again, the biggest takeaway is that yes, folks are different. We know from history why that came to be, but race is a human construct, and it says nothing about who is better than or lesser than anyone else. And so that's my 2-cent takeaway. And then Shannon, I believe if I share it from my side, maybe the audio should work just fine. Or okay, let's give that a go. I'm just going to queue up both of them, so we don't have to wait for the second. Okay.
미야 엄마 물 갖다 줘. 미야 엄마 물 갖다 줘. 물 갖고 와. 얼른 가서 엄마 물 갖다 줘.
Kim, you need to mute.
And let me know if you can hear this. Can we all hear and see the video?
I see it. I don't hear it.
Kevin, there should be a bar up at the top of your video, and there should be, I believe there's the 3 dots, and one of them, if you click on it, will say audio, and you want to share audio from the video.
Okay. Let's try. Okay, let me know if you can hear now. Anything?
Yeah.
Structural, institutional.
Kevin, we can hear it now.
There we go.
Ah, okay, great. All right, from the top.
Kevin, there's no audio.
Oh no.
Kevin, you want me to try sharing it?
Yeah, let's try that. Sorry about that, y'all.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me know if you can hear it.
Structural, institutional, and
can hear
systemic racism
Yes.
refer to the system of structures that have procedures or processes that disadvantage racial minorities and particularly Black people. It refers to the rules, practices.
It went away.
Lost your audio, Shannon.
Did we lose Shannon?
Banks and
Oh,
the real
no.
estate industry that literally outline the neighborhoods where people of
It's
color
back.
live in red ink. If and particularly Black people. It refers to the rules, practices, and customs once rooted in law with residual effects that reverberate throughout society, each with their own nuances. A good example of systemic racism is redlining, a system once used by banks and the real estate industry that literally outlined the neighborhoods where people of color lived in red ink. If you lived inside of the red lines, loans were considered risky and banks were less likely to give loans or even invest. The practice was banned in 1968, but the impacts live on, preventing Black families from amassing wealth at the same rate as their white neighbors on the other side of that red line. Need proof? According to the Federal Reserve, the net worth of a typical white family is $171,000. That's 10 times greater than that of a Black family. Homes in Black neighborhoods are generally and historically worth less than white homes because the developers and businesses that make a neighborhood, well, a neighborhood, are less likely to be there. That means the tax base is lower too, which has a trickle-down effect. Less tax dollars for schools means fewer kindergarten classes, fewer qualified teachers, fewer AP classes. That leads to lower graduation rates from high school and even fewer graduates from college. This is in part caused by the school-to-prison pipeline that disproportionately impacts people of color. Institutional racism is more narrowly defined as the overt and covert forces blocking people of color from accessing the same opportunities as white people. Many of these children may benefit from additional educational and counseling services. Instead of getting the help they need, they're isolated, punished, or incarcerated. Once you have a criminal record, it invades all aspects of your life. Getting everything from a job to an apartment becomes that more difficult. Many people believe their communities are over-policed, presumed to be overly dangerous, but consider this. Black and brown people account for 30% of the U.S. population, but account for 43% of people killed by police and more than half of the incarcerated population. Institutional racism goes beyond just serving time. Something as simple as hair can be used to discriminate. Rules at school and the workplace that don't allow for dreadlocks, cornrows, and braids, they discriminate and don't take into consideration hair texture and singles out people based on their physical traits, creating rules where rules aren't needed, rules that control people of color. So, who gets to make all of these rules in society? Since America was colonized, it's been white people who've made these rules. First with slavery, then Jim Crow laws, and separate but equal rules, and even creating limits on who can immigrate into the country. The term given to define that power, white privilege. It refers to whites' historical and contemporary advantages in access to quality education, decent jobs, a livable wage, home ownership, retirement benefits, and wealth, regardless of socioeconomic status.
Okay, and we're going to share one other video that we have. In addition to kind of this overview of how race works in these spaces that, you know, we are all a part of this US American environment. So we can't say that we're not also impacted in all the ways that are mentioned in the video. So we're going to take another look at one other video. It's a short, about 3-minute video from Vox. And then after we'll have like just some discussion around what we saw.
You may think you know exactly what race you are, but how would you prove it if someone disagreed with you? The fact is, even though race drives a lot of social and political outcomes, race isn't real. One of the first people to attempt to categorize humans according to race was a German scientist around 1776. He came up with 5 different groups according to physical appearance and geographic origin of their ancestors. Americans of European descent eagerly bought into this type of thinking around the same time. Some historians have said the idea that there were different races helped them resolve the contradiction between a natural right to freedom and the fact of slavery. If whites were their own distinct category, then they could feel a lot better about denying freedom to people who they labeled black and decided were fundamentally different. But as political priorities change, definitions of race in America adjust right along with them. For example, if you were of Mexican birth or ancestry in the United States in 1929, you were considered white. Then the 1930 census changed that to non-white to limit immigration. Later, when the US needed to increase its labor force during World War II, these people were switched back to white. And what it took to be black once varied so wildly throughout the country, from 1/4 to 1/16 to the infamous 1 drop of African ancestry, that people could actually change races just by crossing state lines. Then suddenly in 2000, the government decided that Americans could be more than one race and added a multiracial category to the census. This has left many Americans scratching their heads when it comes to selecting who they are. As many as 6.2% of census respondents selected some other race in a 2010 survey. The idea that someone might look one way and identify another way, or that they might be really hard to place in a racial category, is not new. This is why there was a public debate about whether MSNBC's Karen Finney could say she was black, or how we can't even agree on the racial label assigned to the President of the United States. Of course, many people feel their racial identity is very clear and very permanent, but the fact that some people have changed theirs and that no one can really argue with them shows how shaky the very idea of race is. This is all because there isn't a race chromosome in our DNA that people can point to. It simply doesn't exist. When the medical community links race to health outcomes, it's really just using race as a substitute for other factors, such as where your ancestors came from, or the experiences of people who may have been put in the same racial group as you. Dorothy Roberts explains that sickle cell anemia is a prime example of this. The disease is linked to areas with high rates of malaria, which include some parts of Europe and Asia in addition to Africa. It's not actually about race at all. This, of course, does not mean that the concept of race isn't hugely important in our lives. The racial categories to which we're assigned can determine real-life experiences, they can drive political outcomes, and they can even make the difference between life and death. But understanding that racial categories are made up can give us an important perspective on where racism came from in the first place.
Yeah, so I went through this really great exercise years ago. I think I shared with you all that my undergrad is in African American Studies, African and African American Studies, and this really great professor named Dr. David Hines was talking about the experience of understanding that something about our color makes us different, and he referred to this experience as a racial baptism, which is the moment in which we become aware that something about our color may mean something different to the people around us, maybe to the world, but mostly to the people around us. And if anyone here is comfortable, I just invite discussion and conversation about maybe your racial baptism or any other items you might want to share. And I'll start with my own racial baptism, which was very early. It was not a particularly interesting story, but it's around second grade when I was playing on a playground, and there's a child there that told me that Black kids aren't allowed to play on this like in this area, and I just honestly didn't know. I thought I was breaking a rule, and one of the I guess playground attendant folks overheard and pulled me into the office. I thought I was in trouble. I was crying all the time. I was like, I didn't know. I will not go back over there. And they're like, no, what actually happened was wrong. And you can play wherever you want to play, like that shouldn't matter. And I just had no point of reference for any of that piece of what happened. And so that was like my very first kind of like racial baptism into the, you are different, and that difference means that you may experience some different things. No matter who we are, we all have an experience like that, whether we remember it or not. But when we do kind of come to terms with the fact that the way we present ourselves, the way we look, has some impact on the people around us. And so I'll just leave it there, open to any other discussion or comments people want to make.
Well, Tevin, I'm a little bit older than you are. So I don't know if it was a racial baptism or not, but in 1969, when the schools were integrated, I'd been attending an all-Black, elementary and junior high school. And when we integrated, because that school was less than 10 years of age, they brought the white kids to our school. And so that was my first experience going to school, class, building friendships and learning, about, white kids. And this was in Mississippi, of course, and there were no other races. It was Black and white, no Hispanic, no Asian. It was just Black and white students come together, and we had to learn to live and be educated together, and all of the problems and issues associated with it, with it.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Well, I can't really say that I had a racial baptism. I was in the water all the time, so to speak. Growing up in the Deep South in an all Black setting, all Black environment, all Black neighborhood, having zero contact with white people. It was very interesting. As I look back on it, I call it the good old days. I knew love, I knew security, I knew who I was, I knew what my values were, I know where I came from. I didn't have all of those conflicting things that kids growing up in an integrated society are struggling with, in addition to trying to just be a child, trying to go to school and learn and be the best you can be. All Black teachers. I went to a HBCU, a historical Black college and university, where all of those values carried forward. So things such as excellence and high expectation and sense of self-worth were ground into me. I can't think of a particular instance where I was baptized and came up a different way. People find it very difficult when I say my first real exposure to white people was as a 21-year-old adult. When I came to the state of Washington, recruited straight out of Southern University to work on the Hampton Project in Eastern Washington. And so I didn't have a background of integration and interrelation. And the preparation that those all Black environments prepared me for, it carried me over. You know who you are, you know your gifts, you know your talents, and you can apply that no matter what setting you encounter as you move from this place. And so the baptism never really happened, I guess, until I was an adult. And sure enough, that all that background and training, was true. And so, Jim Crow was a reality for me. It wasn't just something I read about, sitting in the back of the bus, colored only, white only. And it was just something in the deep South, Mobile, Alabama, the Gulf Coast South at that. And you just knew who you were and where you were. And we were taught to make the best of it, and it would carry us through. So I can't really say that was a baptism, but the baptism came a lot later for me, and my upbringing prepared me to come out of the water okay. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate. So my extended family, my mom and dad, were born and raised in Georgia, as I was born in Georgia, but very early on at the age of 3, we moved, or actually about the age of 3, 4, we moved to Alaska. So, living there, definitely a melting pot from everything from Hispanic, Filipina, Hawaiian, all races there. And so having to go back every summer to visit grandparents, that was definitely different. And we're from, grandparents were from a small rural area in Georgia. So we kind of still had, even though it was the 80s and early 90s, and even though schools were integrated, there still was visiting grandma and living in her town for the summer. I was around a lot more Black people and not as many white people or other races until I got ready to go either visit somebody in Atlanta or head back home and go to the airport. Was really the only time that I really got to see and play and talk to somebody that was not my own race. So that was a weird awakening, and definitely affected me a lot, because even though we grew up in the military, we always stayed in Alaska. So we didn't really move like normal military people did. But when I ended up marrying my husband and he joined the military, I realized, as I'm realizing now, because I'm getting ready to go back to Georgia after not being there in, a long time, I'm starting to have anxiety about going and visiting next month. I never wanted to be stationed on the East Coast. I always thought of myself as a West Coastie, or, maybe Texas or someplace there, but never wanting to go to the East Coast, and specifically never wanting to go to the South, because I liked being around a bunch of different races, not just my own race. So yeah, I'm still dealing with that as we speak. And I realize now that I'm starting to have some issues with that. I leave at the end of next month, so pray for me, y'all.
Thank you for sharing.
This is Kim, and for me, of course, growing up in Korea, there's only one kind of people. Everybody's black hair. We're all Korean. It's hardly we see any foreigners. And I think I was about 6 or 7, first time I saw American military GI, and that was quite a bit of shock. That I couldn't get rid of that look for a few days because I was really first time seeing anybody like that, and even to taste like a Coca-Cola for the first time. I didn't realize the racial issues. Of course, I'm not going to say there's no class differences and regional differences, right? Right. I mean, wherever you have people, I'm sure there's always this type of a conflict. It's just not going to be the racism, but it's something else. So as I immigrated to U.S. in my early 20s, that's when I realized something, similar to like racism, because now I'm being labeled as this. I'm labeled as Asian American woman, and of course, whenever there's some sort of a negative news blips, then I feel for it. I somehow feel shamed of like human trafficking or sex track of some massage parlor or some of the negative things. I somehow related to my race, and then I think I learned to kind of like racial, seeing the racializing things. I put myself into this category, relate to these things, something that I kind of learned as I came to this country. And my daughter being the biracial, of course, she's one of those have to put the other and have to say that she's more than two race. And of course, she frequently tells me the problems that she faced. I mean, she doesn't really belong either group because in our race, when we see her, she's not full Korean. She's American actually. She was born here, totally Americanized the whole, but then Korean people don't see her as full Korean, and people here don't see as, they constantly ask her, where are you from, right? Even if, and she'll say, I'm from Lacey, Washington. But people will say those things all the time. So that's another issue. I think we're kind of like in this culture of identifying people and sorting people out. And we constantly doing this. I think we need to stop doing that. I don't see why we need to do that. But anyway, that's what I have.
Thank you so much for sharing.
I'm right there with you too, Kim. I have children that are biracial, and that's why I was talking about the ambiguousness of a race, because up until middle school with one of my children, they didn't even know that the kids didn't know that their mother was Black. They only saw my husband, who's white, and they were trying to figure out, is she part French and white? But then if you see my other daughter, we went to Florida right before I started my business, and people thought she was Hispanic. And my boys are the same thing. They think, okay, they're Hispanic and Black, especially if they see them with me. So yeah, why do we have to figure that out? So I totally get that.
Anyone else want to share before we move on to mission stuff?
Well, I'll share shortly. I grew up in rural, small town Washington, and where I was white and looked like everyone else in the 50s and 60s. I did my last stint from sixth grade till high school in Chehalis. And what I do remember is my parents had more worldly experiences than many of the people in my little rural town. They came from the South. And what I do remember vividly is us watching television, probably when I was maybe 8, 9, right around 60, 62, of the marches in the South and the water cannons, and kids my age, adults being attacked by dogs and water hoses. And I sat there with my family and watched that, and it profoundly touched me anyway, that one difference, then people could be treated that way. It made no sense to me, but it was horrifying. It was horrifying.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I think, this speaks to a lot of the beauty in such diverse experiences with race. And in the work that I do, oftentimes, folks frame what groups like this are up to as, a fight against X or a struggle to do something. But I really do see it as more of like a partnership and a promise for something different, something that could change. And I think when we better understand where each of us is coming from, where our starting points were, we can really create something with the energy, with creative energy, with excited energy, with the energy that actually changes things. And so I hope that, one, thank you for sharing, and I hope we get to carry all of our experience into the planning phases and everything that comes next. And so we'll segue into a little bit of that. Shannon, am I able to screen share again? I just want to pull up I don't know if I need permission or anything special. Okay, it's on my side. Can I ask, what screen are you all seeing?
The little pinwheel just circling around.
Blank.
That's the black dark screen.
Okay. Let's try this again. Huh. Oh, okay, there we go. Good to go?
Good to go.
Okay, great. So we discussed these, the videos went over these. The videos were a little bit fast paced. So if folks get a chance, or if you want to revisit those, you do have the links there. The definitions are there. We also have a lot of the definitions in some of our earlier correspondence around, some of the other elements here. So these are all found in that Office of Financial Management for Washington State's glossary of DEI terms. What I want to get into a little bit is mission statement. And again, as Shannon had said earlier, the mission is really about, why were we formed to begin with? What is it that we're up to? What is the mission? What is the goal? And so here we have a few examples of other equity-specific mission statements. And so earlier, I had heard folks saying like, hey, we want to make sure we focus on housing. We want to make sure we focus on income. So those can be added in different places. So, we can have strategies that relate to that. It can be part of our vision. And we're going to talk about visioning and vision statements as well. The way the vision statement works and the mission statement is we have these goals that we set out. And we want to make sure that they're measurable, so that when we say income or we say housing, we have a way to measure where folks are at in, on that spectrum of, stable housing or livable wage, livable income. And so those are some of the things we want to keep in mind as we create is, are the things that we're saying we'd like to see measurable? Can we know that we're headed in the right direction, or we're falling short and need to, provide more resource in a specific area? And so here's just a few mission statements, and I'll give folks a moment to kind of look over these. And we'll say maybe the next like 25, 30 seconds. Okay, we'll move on a little bit here. Another piece about all of the planning is to align with what we know is possible and also within the power of, let's say, a city government or a commission on equity. You know, what is it that folks here have the power to change? And so sometimes, you know, changing the world feels really good and it sounds really good. And the other question is, you know, do we have the resources to change the world, or do we have to actually focus on our own community first and something a little bit closer to home versus the world, you know, in its entirety? Just a couple things to keep in mind, something from Washington State Parks. So what we have here is the existing City of Lacey mission, vision, and themes. And then I've provided a draft of an equity mission statement with some feedback from Shannon and, you know, based on what we've heard, based on what we've learned. And so here's somewhat of a current mission. And then here is a draft of something that we have in mind. And I'll give folks a moment to look over this. And then I wanted to see if anyone had any initial thoughts, knowing that we're going to have plenty of time to kind of digest these a little bit more.
I'd have to say I do like parts of the last sentence where it says which could prevent full participation in government and public policy. The opportunity for full participation, I guess. Whether they participate or not is one thing, but I do like that saying being incorporated in there.
Thank you for that. I also noticed a small typo here, but we'll attend to that later.
In the first sentence of the equity statement, the City of Lacey endeavors to create an inclusive community that embraces the contributions. I'd like to see inserted there, embraces the gifts, talents, experiences, and contributions. Because when we start talking about inclusivity, thinking in terms of that white privilege concept, that there are folk out there with some experiences and gifts and talents that haven't been put to use, haven't been included, haven't been incorporated, that could strengthen everything for everybody. So gifts, talents, experiences, and contributions. That's what creates an inclusive community. And then when we get down to the last sentence, the city is committed to delivering exceptional public services, policies, and programs that integrate racial, I would insert equity and social justice as core principles through, you know, racial equity and social justice as core principles. And then the first sentence on that second paragraph, I couldn't quite make out, was that supposed to be advancing instead of advanced? Okay, all right, then it makes sense to me. And the last sentence, which could prevent full participation in government and public policy making. We're trying to get full participation in people helping to make the policy. Am I right? Public policy making. Talk about the gaps and the barriers, which could prevent full participation in government and public policy making. Is that a, am I here reading that right?
Absolutely. I can
Maybe
work with that a bit.
Pardon me?
Shouldn't we say that, are we just gonna identify or are we gonna dismantle that gap of barrier that will prevent and do all this?
Yeah.
Seems to me like if you just identify it's not job, it's not done.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Mhm.
But as far as a mission statement itself, if we can just identify, you know, because we can't fix it or recommend until they're identified. Is that what you're saying, Kim?
I don't know. To me, like, yeah, I mean, you will need to identify first in order to work on it, but are we going to leave it at identifying? To me, that's a job half done. So if we say dismantle or something of that kind of a language, then it includes the steps that we identified and that can be dismantled. The barriers, gaps and barriers.
And Kim, I think that's a really awesome point. And I think it really brings us full circle back to what the role is of the commission to begin with. You know, is it that this group will actually be doing the dismantling? Or is it that, like, you know, at the end of the day, and especially when we get to planning, you know, this is going to become important. Who's accountable? So is this group accountable for that work? Or is this group accountable for identifying where that work needs to take place by listening and then putting forward those recommendations? And I think it's great to talk about that specifically now in the planning process. So what is the role?
Well, the word that comes to mind to me is impact or impacting. So we can identify and impact change or, you know, in these policies or whatever, or any issue that we've identified. We don't just identify and send it to the council, say we've identified this. I think identifying, we would have some recommendations or that we would present to them to have an impact on it, the impact and change that's needed.
I can understand that our role is to advise, make a recommendation. However, we are not going to just sit there and say that our job is done. We'll make sure that, you know, that information is followed through, and we will follow up and see anything is being done. So even if we may not put our finger to the work itself, I mean, I think we will make sure that whatever the recommendation we made is worked on, and that gets some sort of a action is created to work toward that. So I like what Commissioner Clifton is saying. We may, you know, maybe add impact or something, but identifying, I don't know, it still gives me just like halfway done.
Thank you for that. And I see Shannon has a hand raised.
Well, I raised my hand before the last two commissioners, and I think what I was hearing was to incorporate some sort of idea of an action of, it's not just a, hey, we found something, but it's a, hey, bringing it forward, providing those recommendations and seeing what types of follow through and follow up can occur after providing that, and what other avenues, whereas it's looking at policies, programming, partnerships with other entities that the commission could take a look into on behalf of the city to continue the work that the commission and the city is doing in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
Yes, I agree that we as a commission have no authority, we have no resources, none of those things. If we could do an effective job of identifying these gaps and barriers and then uh, state some specific recommendations. And when we get into the strategic planning with the goals and the action steps, and that becomes incorporated into the city's strategic plan, it also calls for revisiting in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, and you monitor and you evaluate. If we identify, for instance, Cliff's issue, the housing, if we identify the housing as an issue and then recommend a goal of, say, decreasing homelessness by 30% over the next 3 years. We've identified and we've also made a recommendation, but we have no means as a commission to do anything about the homeless situation other than identify it and make some recommendations for change. That's how I see this mission statement, the Equity Commission mission statement, keeping our role and responsibility in check and not giving the impression to anybody out there that we have any more authority than we really do.
Okay, I would then suggest that perhaps then we say identify and make recommendation or something like that. That'll be more of a job done than, I don't know, to me. If everybody else is okay, that's fine. But to me, yeah, identify and make recommendations so that it can be changed. We don't just point a finger and say, hey, that needs to be corrected and leave it at that. We passed the buck to someone else to do the job because we didn't have authority. I don't know.
I agree with you, Kim. I mean, it has to move beyond identifying, but I was just relating it back to how mission statements usually work and how it guides you into that strategic planning process. So yeah, I concur. So we identify the input. Yeah.
Can we, in the first sentence of that second paragraph, the Commission on Equity assists the City of Lacey in identifying, and then it goes on, could we put something in there identifying, I like under the City of Madison, they say establish racial equity and social justice as core principles in all decision making. I mean, it seems like we could add what the action, kind of the action, our suggestions for action in that first sentence. Well, it's all one sentence, but I mean, in the beginning.
Commissioner Clay, I think you bring up a really good point, and I would redirect you just back up to the broader city equity mission statement, where it does talk about advancing equity in Lacey, and certainly I think there's room in that statement where it says integrating equity as core principles, and we talked about Chair Jackson's addition of the social justice element. And so this is kind of the broad, hey, this is what the city is doing. And then the second statement is this is how the city or the Commission on Equity is helping the city achieve, this mission that they are working on. Mm-hmm. So I know, again, this is one of this information was just provided, to the commission last week, and certainly we want to take a deeper look into the language as this. So as I send out the vision statement, I'll send out the mission statement as well, and I welcome edits and changes and questions on it, and we can continue this conversation. I do want to recognize that it's 7 o'clock and we have a few more things on our agenda. And so just for the purpose of time, I do want to keep us moving. So if the commission is okay with this, I'd like to send this language out with the draft equity value statement for further, review by each of the commissioners, and then another discussion with all of the feedback that each of the commissioners comes up with the mission statement that is presented tonight, as well as the equity value statement.
And Shannon, when you send that out, if you could just insert in italics or color or something, the word recommendation, or up there where I suggested gifts, talents, experiences, and I mean, just wherever tonight's discussion, just so as people are reading it, they can see what came up tonight and you know, see if it makes any sense or need to be deleted or expanded or whatever. But it would just help, you know, in knowing what we started with and where this discussion led to. So as we revisit it next time, we probably can be right where we want to be.
Absolutely. Well, I'll make sure that I get some notes from Tevin with my notes, and we'll incorporate them into the drafts and send it out to all of you, hopefully by the end of this week. And then, you know, look for some feedback in the next couple of weeks so we can come back and take all of the information that we hear from the commissioners and put it into a couple of drafts for the commission to consider again.
Great.
Awesome. And I heard a lot of really great things that I think are strategies that we might use in order to do those things in the mission. And so that's something that I'm so excited to jump into is the planning, the action planning. So, you know, taking it from theory into, you know, our everyday. Thank you all so much. And I will see you all very soon. So you'll see some correspondence from me.
All right. Thank you, Tevin.
Thank you.
So that takes us then into item 4B, our 2022 work plan.
Well, commissioners, I know it sounds like I talk about work plans quite a bit. Hopefully this is the last time for at least a brief period. But every year, each of our advisory boards creates a work plan. And, you know, we started off 2021 with working on a work plan, and then we revisited last month, you know, a draft ideas for incorporation into 2022. So what I'm here to present with tonight is another draft of the 2022 work plan. And this takes into account, you know, some of the work that the Commission on Equity has been doing throughout 2021. And then also some of the information that we heard as part of the community engagement sessions, and tries to look at what might be work that the Commission can take up in 2022. So I'm going to share my screen with you really quickly just to go over what is included in the draft work plan. So let me all know when you can see my screen. Great. So just a cover page where we get to introduce the members. This builds off of the flyer that we had for our community engagement session, and also talks a little bit about the commission itself and how it was formed, and then ways that individuals could join our meetings like the one we're having currently. It provides some background on how the commission was set together with our work group that started the process, and then going to the ordinance, and then going into the commission members. It provides that overview of the 2021 Commission on Equity activities, which, you know, we've been meeting since June, and we have done a lot since June, and it's good to take a look back. And this just provides that very high level overview of all of the activities that you all have been engaged in. It also provides a very high level overview of the community engagement sessions. And just a brief side note on that, we are having that alternative online engagement session open until the end of this month. I checked this afternoon and we had 24 individuals actually take that survey. So once that officially closes, I'll make sure to update this information with any additional information that was provided between when I last updated it and when we close it. But we heard a lot through the community engagement sessions on partnerships, you know, working with other entities that might be out there in the community, increasing communication across the board, but particularly with JBLM, our new residents and new families to the area. We heard a lot about accessibility. We heard a lot of ideas for expanding outreach, you know, including, you know, making flyers available in other places in the community using banners, reader boards, ads, etc. And we heard a lot about inclusivity through the engagement sessions, and then finally evaluation and benchmarks. So following the meetings, we debriefed at our last Commission on Equity meeting and just talked about some things that this group would like to see incorporated moving forward into our 2022 work plan, and certainly some things as far as engaging the community that I heard and have incorporated into this document for your consideration is, holding more focus groups, going out into the community and meeting people where they are, having a presence at events, which ties into going out into the community and meeting them where there are, increasing our communication efforts, and being creative and flexible as we approach 2022 for ways to engage with the community moving forward. So that brings me to the 2022 work plan and some items that have been identified in there. And I have a list here, but I also just want to show you the tentative timeline of the work plan, just to provide a little bit broader of an idea of what the commission may be taking up in 2022. So starting on table B in your packet, you'll see that all of the items listed above are found in this table. This just provides a year-long snapshot. And you can see the DEI strategic planning process continues through June and into the spring. Some other items that are marked for this body to consider are a review of our communications plan. So this is the City of Lacey is working on creating a comprehensive communications plan. And given all of the conversation on inclusivity, engagement, and outreach, we certainly want to have this body review the communications plan for some recommendations and ideas. Also reviewing citywide recommendations and Heritage Month recommendations, and making recommendations to the City Council on month recommendations, proclamations, etc. Finding a way to work collaboratively with our community partners. Again, this was something that was identified through our engagement process as something to increase doing. Continuing our city department presentations. And the first one that we'll have in 2022 is actually going to be in February, and that'll be the Lacey Police Department is going to come and present to the Commission on Equity. The plan being that we would continue to have these city departments every other month or so, depending on what else is on the schedule. But that way the Commission on Equity gets a broad exposure to city departments and understands what departments are doing and what events departments are putting on and what kind of outreach and engagement efforts the departments are doing as well. The city is also working on a brand new website, which is one of the largest ways that the city communicates with individuals in the community. And again, given that we want to be inclusive, we want to reach out to as many individuals as possible. We certainly want to have the Commission on Equity take a look at that. Equity tools and equity maps, which we'll get into a little bit more detail later on, but this is something that would help us as a city as we review policies and programs, and something we'll discuss with the strategic planning process, but certainly something we'd like to take up a little bit later in the year, with the idea that these tools would help us evaluate what and how we're doing as a city for our programs and policies. A joint meeting with the City Council. So every year, all of the advisory boards hold a joint session with the City Council. Ours is scheduled for February 24th. So you can see that here. And this would be a full meeting with all of the commissioners and all of the City Council to talk about what the commission has been working on, but also what is in the 2022 work plan. And that's why I'm doing a fairly thorough review here, so that if there are items that you all want to have changed or talk about, we certainly have that space before we present it to our City Council in February.
What time is that meeting?
So that would be at 6 p.m. So starting at the first meeting, which is on January 6th in 2022, all City Council meetings will be at 6 p.m.
Is it approximately like a 2-hour meeting, or?
I think that is a good approximate, Commissioner Hart. This group would be going first. There are 2 items currently planned for that evening that could change as we get closer to the date. But typically the advisory body is the first group to go, and then the City Council will take up any other items following the advisory bodies.
All right.
Focus groups, certainly something that the commission has indicated that they would like to do more of. And as part of tonight's agenda, as we get to the director's report, I would like to talk a little bit more in depth about focus groups moving forward. So I'll save some comments for that. Continuing to work with Indigenous tribes on recommendations and collaborations. hosting some additional community engagement sessions. Now, this will certainly be something we'll want to evaluate on how we want to do based on all of the information that was learned at the past couple of community engagement sessions. Meeting with the Lacey Community Relations Committee. So we actually just did that, and know we're going to get a overview of that from Chair Jackson here in a second. But we certainly would like to continue to check in with the Community Relations Committee at least once a year to provide an update on some of the activities that the Commission is doing, specifically around community engagement and outreach and participation in programs in public policy. Juneteenth celebration collaboration, also something that should be spanned across 2022. And I know we're also going to get an update from Vice Chair Brown on this here in just a second. Working on the work plan for 2023, and then also another celebration and event that the City of Lacey helps put on is our Lacey Cultural Celebration. So seeing if there was an interest from the Commission on Equity, and also collaborating and supporting that event as we get closer. And that is in March of 2023. So you can just see, this is a second page, and it just continues through July through December with the same items that I just outlined. So that really quickly, commissioners, is an overview of the 2022 work plan. And my question for you all is, were there any things that you were expecting to be on here that might be missing, or any items that you want to have more conversation on looking to 2022?
Couple of quick things, Shannon. I'll go back to the front and come forward where we have the background about the commission. I had pointed out at an earlier meeting that Archbishop Lorenzo Peterson had been left off of that original group of people that came together in several meetings of that work group. And again, he's not listed here so that needs to be there. And then I have a question on the colored chart itself. I see workshop 4, 5, 7. What happened to 6? Is that one of those we shuffled? And my question is, how have these monthly activities changed since the alterations / additions we made in October, November, and December?
So Chair Jackson will certainly incorporate Archbishop Lorenzo Bishop into Peterson.
Yeah.
Thank you. Into the group. I know he was very
no problem. Yeah.
in that process, so I do apologize for that. As far as workshop 6, so if you recall, as we were getting ready for the community engagement workshops, there was a workshop a little bit later on that was how to engage the community. And so we actually moved that one up earlier. So we have gone through workshop number 6. And so that's why it's not identified on the 2022 work plan.
Okay, yeah, I knew we shifted something back there in late October to make his listening sessions in November happen. And we moved some things up. So that was my basic question. So when you just look here, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 on the second page. So yeah, that's what happened. That's good.
Commissioners, one thing I just wanted to add too is if you actually look at the 2022 work plan, it does state that the Commission on Equity is working on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan, which will help guide future Commission on Equity work. And while we're anticipating it's going to be done here in our summer time frame of 2022, that our continued work on this and or the completion might inform some additional items that we'd like to have on the work plan for 2022. So it provided some space for if something does come up as we continue our work, that we can certainly make sure to integrate it into our 2022 work plan.
Great.
And I imagine something that might come up for the council that they would then hand to us, and it would add to onto our task list.
Absolutely. And Commissioner Clay, that's part of the conversation too with the joint meeting is presenting, this is the work plan, and seeing if there are items identified right at that point that they would like to have also added on to the work plan. But to your point, they could, come back at a later time and say, I'd really like the Commission on Equity to take a look at, this policy, this program.
Great. Well, we want to take action on approving this 2022 work plan so that it can move forward and it can be presented at the February 24th meeting with the Joint City Council. Are there any questions on the work plan as presented by Shannon? Any additional questions, I should say? Or I would entertain a motion to approve the 2022 work plan for the Equity Commission.
I motion that we approve the 2022 work plan.
It's been moved by Annie and seconded by Cliff that we approve the 2022 work plan of the Equity Commission. Any discussion? Hearing no additional discussion, all those in favor of the motions say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. The motion carries unanimously. And this will be the work plan that will be presented at the February 24th meeting. Okay? Very good. That takes us to commission reports. And the first item there under 5A is a report on the Community Relations Committee meeting that happened on December 6th. And in addition to myself, commissioners, let's see, John, commissioners, and Clay and Hedgeman joined me in that presentation to the Community Relations and Public Affairs Committee. And it was an afternoon meeting and it went quite well. And I'll just give you a brief overview here, and then Annie can join me, and John hasn't been able to come in on us. But we had a good meeting, and we had several members of the City Council present, Council Member Stedman, who is the chair, Council Member Cox, and Council Member Kunkel. And we also were joined by Scott Spence, the city manager, Shannon Kelly Fong, our staff person, and the assistant city manager, and then Brandon Carter, who is the staff person to the Community Relations Committee. And they essentially were presented with the activities we've been engaged in, kind of a summary of what we had learned from the listening sessions. We shared with them some of our thought processes that went into the planning of the listening sessions, and shared with them the highlights of some of the key themes and issues that emerged, and also some of the things we learned from what we called an experiment. And commissioners were terrific in bringing in some additional information to help the council members understand some of the things we considered and how it had all gone. And Jonathan and Annie chimed in quite well, and they were very pleased. We had a good interactive conversation going on, and they thanked us for all our work. But Annie, anything you can add to that meeting we had with the council members?
Well, it was a good introduction to some of the council members that we hadn't met before, and they seemed very supportive and interested. It was good.
It was very good. And
I'd also like to add that I made it a point to mention the possibility of us making that a normal thing going forward, or perhaps a regular meeting. I just kind of wanted to put that out here to us as well. And he mentioned that they would bring it up whenever they had a full city council meeting, but that is something that was brought up as well.
Welcome, John. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome. So that means we had a full commission present. Thank you for adding to that. Yes, I would concur that they were pleased with the interaction and look forward to our work continuing and hearing from us in our next session. So when we meet with the full council on the 24th, all of the council will be there and we'll have an opportunity to hear from us. It was a good experience, and I think set a good tone for future meetings of this committee of the council to take place. Any questions? Hearing none, then the other commissioner report is going to be from Cliff Brown.
Thank you. In the packet that Shannon sent out, near the bottom of the packet, there's a memo there. It's an overview of the meeting that Shannon and I had with members of the Fred U. Harris Lodge, number 70. We had this meeting on December the 1st. And last month's meeting, we had shared that we were scheduled for this meeting to talk about Juneteenth and talk about us potentially collaborating with them on their event to make it, to grow the event and make it a definite citywide event. And so we met with some of the leadership and a number of the members of the lodge. And, of course, the purpose was to, talk about, joining them and helping them to execute the Juneteenth celebration. Now, we asked, a couple of questions of them. And one was, we needed to determine if they were open to having us, work with them in doing the event. And they were very excited about it. And they said, absolutely, they'd like to work with us and have us to come in to enhance what they're doing and help them, in a few areas that could really grow of the event. And so that is something we looked at moving forward on with them. And that's why I'm presenting this to the, recommended it to the commission. So they gave us a little bit of background. And of course, they've been holding it for more than 40 years. And they've held it throughout Thurston County, not just in Lacey. They've moved, among a number of parks to include Tobin State Park and some down in I guess in the Tumwater area. But in the last few years, they've been holding it at the RAC. And the RAC is, of course, a huge park, and it can accommodate a large number of people. And so they are looking to return to the RAC this year. Now, last year, due to COVID, they did a drive-through at their lodge, and they still were able to serve about 250 people. They've been serving in excess of 400, people during these particular events. And so they shared the schedule with us, of that day and what sort of happens. And as you can see there in the report, that they show up real early, about 5 a.m., and they start to prepare. They bring in grills and they prepare food and get organized. And they do that up until about noon. At noontime, when they're ready to go, they start off with a prayer. And then they cover some history of the event and Juneteenth and other information. And then they serve meals to people up until about 4 o'clock or until the food runs out. And some of the events that happen, some kids are playing basketball. There's horseshoes that are being played. Some kids play tennis and things, and other smaller activities that occur. Now, then I was interested in how can we help to grow the event or to enhance the event. So the big question I had for them was, do you have displays during the event? Do you have tents and other things there that represent organizations, other organizations? And they said, no, they haven't had that in the past, but they thought that was a great idea and they're very open to that. And that is something that they would definitely discuss during their committee meetings and their planning meetings that are going to start in January. And the idea behind that was to have things like, I'm a member of a foundation and we have tent make display, my fraternity. I'm sure there's a Korean American organization that could be there, other diverse organizations that would be happy to display and to share information, about their organization and let people know that, yes, we're here in functioning and supporting, the community. And the other item was speakers. We talked a little bit about, the history that they share Juneteenth and all. But if the city of Lacey is going to support and work with them, then of course we asked Mayor Ryder to say hello to the people, briefly, and invite in others who could potentially come and say welcome to people and say hello. That will be our Congresswoman Marilyn Strickland, who represents this area. And then other Thurston County mayors are probably going to get jealous and want to be a part of it, since this is sort of a county-wide event. Their lodge is actually, I think, in Tumwater. So in the list of people who could just briefly say hello, be present, shake some hands, is something that will be discussion during the committee meetings, during the planning meetings. So, and how can we help? They asked if we could support them in marketing and promotion of the event. Maybe do the banner that hangs on College Street there by the City Hall, with some sponsoring some of the events, activities, or some part of the program and the event, and maybe some other areas that are yet to be identified. And so, the meeting, we concluded agreeing that, I would serve on the planning committee. And we're open to, if there's another, commissioner that would like to be a part of it, then, that would be good as well. And they're looking at getting started during the month of January. So
And they haven't identified when in January yet?
Okay, say it again.
Oh, sorry. They have not identified when in January yet?
No, well, I don't know, Shannon, have you received any additional communications from them?
I have not. Commissioners, I will reach out to them and see if they have determined a date.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I have a question. At noon, there's a prayer. Is there any kind of like religious denomination involved here with this? What kind of a prayer?
Well, you look at this lodge, and with these members here are Christian. So I'm sure they would have a Christian prayer. Now this is, part of the whole diversity thing, and being on the planning committee. If there's something else we want to recommend to them, then we need to identify that. So if we want to, if we do a Christian prayer, or do, I don't know, another denomination or something, another religious prayer, then that's something that we need to identify, and so we can work through that piece. Did you have something in mind?
No, I was just curious if that will give impression that, this is particular group of activity, not open to all. I'm just wondering, because I go sometimes some of the events, and they have this type of prayer events and things like that, and I just don't know if that is included.
But this I would say that
Go
it's
ahead.
definitely a prayer in the Black tradition.
Right.
This is essentially a Black observance, in observance of historical emancipation of slavery. And so it's a prayer in the Black tradition. And I'll just say that it's the same as any other activity happening in the community by some other ethnic group. They have their traditional prayer, so it wouldn't be my interest in trying to insert what has been the 41-year tradition of Fred U. Harris Lodge into something different now. They're carrying over a tradition here in the Black tradition. And the only other thing I'd say about the invitees, I know they are already planning to invite the governor, because this will be the first year that Juneteenth will be a state and national holiday. So they're trying to get a written letter of invitation into him early on to let him know that here's a Juneteenth celebration right here across town from you, and we would love to have you involved in it. He can go on to Seattle or Yakima or somewhere later, but we want to make sure, they want to make sure that he knows he's being invited as one of those featured speakers. So I don't know if they've done that already or not, or if that claim came up in their discussion, Cliff, but you'll do a great job of representing us.
Right. Yes, it's open to speakers. These was just some initial meeting and some ideas,
right?
You know, having the congresswoman, the mayor, some others, but it's wide open, and you know, having the governor, that would be great. And so, yes, those things will be developed through the planning group. But just a thing that's a learning for the community is, you know, this is an African American celebration, like it was stated, and it gives people an opportunity to observe what we do in the African American community, how we celebrate, how we give reverence to something that's important to the African American community. We're not trying to, you know, take this event, change it, what they do. We want to enhance it. And the one piece that the Equity Commission I thought could do would be to allow other organizations in the community to be there and show their wares and be able to share information. And that's where I think the diversity can come in, would be having other organizations. It could be, you know, someone from the LGBTQ community could have a tent, you know, Korean, Hispanic, you know, other organizations that would, you know, want to share information and show their presence would be great.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and for the African American community to learn about other ethnic groups and what's going on, so that, you know, if you don't know, you can't support, you can't attend, you can't be there. So that would be important information for us to be able to share as we're trying to identify these communities within a community that we were talking about, and begin to bring that togetherness together. Yeah.
Just a point about our function. This is on our 2022 plan, is to help support this, then we take our plan to the city council, they okay it, then we have permission. I just want to know that we have the city's permission to go ahead and be this involved. I mean, does that?
Hey, Commissioner Clay, you know, certainly we can be involved, you know, having a couple members currently go and sit on the planning and learning more about what they're going to do so they can report out, so we can have, you know, more information on what the process is like. And we'll take the information we have to the council when we meet with them on February and discuss how this would be a good opportunity for all of the reasons that you all just described. And then, you know, with the council approving the work plan, then yes, moving forward with collaborating with the Fred U. Harris Lodge would be something that we would continue to do moving on from that point.
Yeah, great.
And I would add that this whole thing came to us by way of the mayor. And so I think we can count on Mayor Ryder speaking up on our behalf in support of this collaboration for this Juneteenth. That's where it all started to start with. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can move on, but I mean, I guess I need to clarify that my goal is not to be, I guess, how should I say, like pick on it or scrutinizing it under putting in something, but make it more inviting people beyond the, where people don't need to be stuck on this Christian prayer at the beginning, that it kind of like hinders their invitation to this event. That's what I'm trying to make.
Well, they've been doing it for 40 years and with huge success. And like I say, it's a cultural thing. You know, it's in the African American community. It doesn't matter what type of event you attend, if it's a banquet or other types of celebration, we do prayer, and we primarily do a Christian prayer, a Baptist or Methodist minister, someone's going to do
Protestant.
a prayer. Protestant going to do a prayer. That's tradition. And now with this event, we're not, like I say, trying to change everything to make this all I don't know, a diverse celebration in that Juneteenth. We don't want anyone to think that, oh, Juneteenth was a diverse historical event. No, it was something that impacted the Black community, the African American community, and this is how we give reverence to that particular event. Now, if the Native Americans did an event in the community, I'm pretty sure that they would do their traditional things, cultural things, and we observe and we learn. I've been at some of those. If the Korean community did it, I'm sure that you would do things in a more traditional cultural sense, and we get to learn. This opportunity to explain and share with us what you're doing and why you're doing it, and the importance of those types of things. So we get to learn from various communities. Everything is not all inclusive. It is sometimes let's be there, let's observe, let's participate and learn. And I think this is one of those events.
Thank you, Cliff, for that explanation. So it sounds like you, as our primary representative to this, you're recommending that the Equity Commission does collaborate with Fred U. Harris Lodge moving forward in the planning for Juneteenth 2022.
That is my recommendation. And I guess the question is there another commissioner who is compelled to join with me or not? I mean,
Sounds
I'm
like
fine.
Marquita is ready to jump in if the date is conducive with her schedule.
Right.
I see her hand up.
Yeah.
So there's your second commissioner that's willing to work with you on that.
Okay, yeah, I checked my schedule. It was clear, so I'll do it.
Okay. And if
I had
there's
to
a
get that
third
in.
one that's
Shannon, what
interested,
you
so
laughing
be it. But we at least have the two. We at least have
Right.
the two of you. And if there are others, great. Because I'm thinking, we have this highly energetic youth commissioner that really shows a lot
Yeah, I
of
know. I'm
interest
on their site right now, scrubbing their site to see if I can figure out a date.
Their website is not very good.
Scenes supporter.
Okay. So we have two and possibly
Okay.
three if a third one steps forward. So thank you for that, Chris. Cliff. I do know the difference. And thank you for that very good representation. So that takes us to our director report. Shannon?
And commissioners, I will email Mr. Evans and CC Commissioner Hart and Commissioner Brown on that so we can determine what the dates are for their meetings moving forward fairly quickly. I know they did express that they would like to start planning in January. So a couple of items, and the first one that's listed under the director's report is the focus group discussion. So I know I mentioned focus groups, and that's certainly something that we have been talking about, and then we heard more about after our community engagement session on reaching communities and communities within communities here in the city of Lacey. So I'd like to start focusing a little bit more attention on setting up some of those groups moving forward. So I'm hoping that there could be a couple of commissioners that might be able to meet and help start planning and organizing those meetings with the Commission on Equity. This would likely be another meeting, so it's like a subcommittee of commissioners once or twice a month, just as we start to establish what we want to accomplish with the focus groups, and then who we want to reach out to and engage with the focus groups. So I'm wondering if there are some commissioners that would like to partake in that organization and planning moving forward.
So could you tell a little bit about what that looked like? I mean, if I would do it, would I be organizing, for example, for Korean community, I'll be organizing promoting the event, facilitating, gathering. I mean, is it something like that, or how do you anticipate this works?
Yeah, great question, Commissioner Sauer. So what I would anticipate is getting the group together just to start with kind of a fundamental question of, who did we not hear from during the commission or the community engagement sessions? Who would we like to hear was underrepresented, or maybe we didn't hear it all from? What are other communities out there that we'd like to get involved and engage? So just first of all, just having a conversation on that, and then also, what groups should we reach out to as part of this process beyond that to have more just focused conversations on. And so from that discussion, it would be, having some conversations on what we'd like to have as focus groups. So what would be the structure? How many people would we be bringing in? And, we learned a lot through our first community engagement sessions. And I imagine we're going to be learning a lot through our first couple of focus groups. And, each focus group is likely going to be very different as well. So I think first, it's just part of the identification, doing some planning and organization. And then part of it will also be reaching out to individuals and groups to determine, what dates and times would be working best for them, and to have some communication in advance, of, kind of what we're gonna, how the focus group is going to be organized and function. And then as far as the actual, the day of the focus groups, certainly we can have conversations with any commissioners who want to help in this organization if they'd like to be part of the facilitation of those conversations during the actual event. So certainly open to that, Commissioner Sauer.
Okay.
Was there any information, Commissioner Sauer, that you were specifically looking for?
Oh, no, I guess I was thinking about, should I organize something within Korean community? Because when we had a survey out, of course, I sent it out to folks that within my circle, and I believe a few participated. Do I want to go further? Will they have time to meet, or should I be kind of like, connect one-on-one as when they have time? So some of those things I'm not quite sure how to go about at this point, because a lot of people work, and it's kind of have hard time making time to meet and do those things. So what would be the best way? So I'm just thinking out loud, I guess. Do I want to say I want to do this before I know all these things? Or so that's what I'm at.
Commissioner Sauer, I think those are really great questions that, part of this planning group would be able to have conversations on, is, knowing that each focus group and each outreach is not going to be, similar to the other, just having a sounding board for, what might be good ways to approach these targeted engagement and outreach efforts.
Mm-hmm.
I hear Shannon asking us for to volunteer to be a part of a subcommittee to begin planning for these focus groups. How many, when, where, venues. So the planning of it, then I'm expecting, are going to need to kick in as commissioners to actually make the focus groups happen, because we represent certain constituencies. But right now we're talking about a subcommittee to begin planning for the focus groups. And so I'll raise my hand to help with the plan in this subgroup to help with these focus group planning. And then we come back with a plan for the focus groups, and people see where the opportunities are to step up and take some leadership in the community that they feel they have the best connection to. And, different outreach efforts work differently with different groups. And so we've got to incorporate all of that to be successful with the various focus groups. So that's what I hear her saying. So would that be anyone else interested in working on a subcommittee for planning of the focus groups? Because they're going to take place over time. Yeah.
I'd like to be part of that, Chairman.
Thank you.
Dear women.
Thelma. Thank you, Annie. Is there someone else? Me, Annie, one other, which will keep us from having a quorum.
Please put me in. I usually have to have a pretty good idea how I go about, but I want to get in first, and then we figure it out.
But that's what the planning is all about. We all got to figure it out, because this is new territory for us. but it's something we thought we wanted to add as an extra effort to make sure we've made the right outreach. So we've all got to get involved before it's all said and done. We all going to have to become facilitators. We all are going to have to be publicists and marketers for these focus groups if they're to have any use for us. Otherwise, we just getting together for a good time with folk we enjoy being with, and it's more to it than that. There's a lot of work. So
Yes,
Annie,
ma'am.
Kim, and I will serve as the subcommittee working on the focus group planning. Okay,
Fantastic.
thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll be reaching out to the three of you to establish a date to get together and have some more conversations about that.
Great.
So I already mentioned the joint meeting with the full city council. And again, that's on February 24th, 2022. Connected to that, I mentioned that the city council meetings are changing the time in which they're meeting. So they're going to be meeting at 6 p.m. starting in the new year. They're also going to start meeting in person. So that meeting will potentially be a hybrid meeting. So you could come into City Hall, or you could continue to come to the meetings over Zoom, which leads me to our January meeting, which is on January 4th. Given that the council is going to start meeting in person and providing that hybrid opportunity, we can also
January 24th
is our next meeting.
As the council, okay.
As the Commission on Equity, our next meeting is January 24th.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
Our meeting with the council is on February 24th. This is very confusing.
Yeah. Well, you said January 4th at first.
Okay, so
Yeah.
January 24th is our next meeting, which
Right.
is the fourth Monday of the month. And given that the council is going to start meeting in person on January 6th, I think I have all my dates correct there.
Okay.
This commission will have the opportunity, unless something changes, to also meet in person and have a hybrid opportunity too, if there were any individuals who couldn't make it in person or didn't feel comfortable coming in person. So I wanted to just let the commission know that we will have that opportunity on the 24th unless something changes between now and then.
Great.
And then my last item, which is a perennial question that I asked the commission, is who would like to do the inspirational item at the January 24th meeting?
I think I can, because I think it's about my turn now. I'll come up with something.
Fantastic,
Okay.
Commissioner Sauer, thank you. And Chair, that is all of the items under my director's report.
Great. Thank you. Is there any other business to come forth from any other commissioner?
I will be gone out of town on the 24th, so I will definitely be on Zoom. Should I be landed? Of course, that's when I'm in Atlanta. So I will be, if I'm not still on a plane, I'll be online.
Great.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. Hearing no other comments coming from any commissioner, then I will adjourn the meeting at 7:46. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Happy New
Thank
Year
you.
to you.
Happy
Stay
New Year.
safe
We'll see you next month.
and stay
See you
warm.
then.
Okay, thank you.
Happy
Good
New
night
Year,
now.
everybody. See you next
New
year.
Yes. Goodbye now. Thank you.
Bye.